They can find that page.
Yeah, yes. You can go to other people's stuff.
Oh, you should have it left. And I'm like, I don't know, please agree. Take me out of the marketing. Like, we're not your stuff.
What are we not to you about? Anyway, thanks for that.
Oh, no, yeah, thank you so much. Oh, their microphones. Yeah, their microphones I use. They don't work well integrated into this, but I just to do some little sort of seeing and things. Yeah, great. You were great.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for you, sir. Thank you. So basically, YouTube Live is now on the channel. Okay, so if somebody's going with Zoom, many things have the slides coming like standard. That's good. You can see slides. I can switch between over. Let's see. The slides.
What am I doing for a microphone?
Like this.
Thank you.
That's probably the smartest.
We're gonna try those for camping. Yeah.
Yes. Is there any they just get the screen.
Good evening, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started. As usual, I have just a few things to pass along, and then we'll move forward with our speaker. All right. Next slide, please. Okay, everyone, here are the upcoming events. I don't know where we are in signing up for Green River in the meeting. But remember, if you want to go, you need to talk to Rich. Anybody have any questions about those two events other than how many people have signed up? So I don't know the answer to that. The green is sold out? Okay. But if you want, you can get on a waiting list. Again, by emailing Rich. All right. Any questions about the trips? And again, we'll have our typical fall trip will happen in October. And we'll have more details on that as we get closer. Here's the events coming up. At Dorsey's next month. So remember, we'll be bringing in 40 more chairs. We'll be expecting it to be the biggest event of the year. And it's interesting, huh? So, so it should be a good event. All right. March 26th. That's the first Moving Waters trip. Again, if you haven't been with us on a Moving Waters trip, they're on Thursdays. We meet at some place. This one we'll meet down at the Lone Tree Park and Ride, where the further south, it's actually not Lone Tree, there's another name for it. It's one south of Lone Tree. We'll park in the garage and we're going to head down to Pueblo. And Mark will lead that trip. And Cindy's going to talk about this in just a minute. And April 25th is the Earth Day event. That's a Saturday. That's the event we have with the city of Lakewood. It's in Lakewood's Bear Creek Park. We'll have more details on exactly where they want you to meet, but it's normally in the Stone House, if you know where that is. So Bear Creek flows out of Morrison, flows through Lakewood and into the park, and we plant trees and we provide $4,000 right this year, $4,000 to the city of Lakewood, and we'll plant those trees and spend about 4 hours there. It's a great day. Lakewood normally provides us lunch. We'll see what happens. I haven't heard much more from that. Cindy. So Colorado Trout Unlimited, not CTU, right? Colorado. Yeah.
That's coming up with Colorado Travel Limited CTU, aka CTU, right? So as you see, March 31st, our chapter, CCTU, the chapter, is partnering with the Ken Carroll community over in Littleton, over by, you guys can hear me okay? Over by C470 on the inside of C470, not behind the hogback. And we're going to teach kids to type rice. So this is a youth event, and we would love anyone who would love to come and help. We need maybe about 4 or 5 volunteers to help. All the equipment and stuff is provided. You just need to show up. Basically, it's from 4 o'clock to 6:30 on that night, and we're trying to create some partnerships with the communities on the west side of our chapter area. So if you need the link to that, we put it in the newsletter. So if you can't find it, come see me. But Lincoln has provided it to us, so hopefully you guys all have that. And thank you for those who have signed up. Got a nice showing so far. So that's March 31st. March 19th, 2 days after Mr. Dorsey, is the annual gala. It's going to be this year at the Cable Center at University of Denver. And even if you don't go, we're going to have a silent auction, which you can participate online. So make sure that you guys have a link to get online and see it. We're probably going to open it up maybe 2 weeks before, so really March 5th, to open it up for bidding. And there will be some also live auction items there at the gala. Well, it's going to be a nice shindig. I know some of our folks at the table. Thank you for getting it together. And anyone else who wants to come, please do. It's a lot of fun. And we're going to be celebrating that, every river needs a champion, which is the new Travel Limited branding. And we're all champions of all watersheds, in our case, South Platte area. And we're also going to be celebrating all of our own place. Why are we all members of Travel Limited? So we're going to celebrate. And if anyone has great stories, think about that. Because we're going to have a little section where we're going to record your why so that we can share it and with our story. So that's coming up. Also, we've had several folks like John Paverka back there, and Mike Myers and Rich Polanski have been donating some flies and other things to the auction. So if you like any of the flies that we have, the illustrious tires here, come on to the auction. So, and then the last thing, if you look to tie flies, so if anybody, you probably haven't seen this unless you were at the fall rendezvous and some of the folks were at. But we're also doing a challenge between the chapters. So it's called Type Future. And what we're doing is kind of like a tie-a-thon type thing, but there's no limit on the number of flies you can tie. But the chapter that ties the most flies will win the coveted trophy. And that trophy will be kept in that chapter for a year, and there'll be probably a traveling trophy with the names of chapters as the years go by. The purpose of this is to collect flies for our youth events, especially camp, stream programs, etc. So if you like to tie, even if you just tie 10, that's 10 flies the kid can use on an event. So I have a QR code here, and I also have it on my phone if anybody wants to scan it. I've got a couple of these flyers. I'll go around the room. But, like I said, if you just do 10, 15, great. That's all we need. Anything is more than 0. So thank you for doing that too. Thanks.
Okay, last thing on this picture, for those that may have noticed, it's snowing on the Green River and we're out there. So if you're going on the Green River trip, be prepared. Next slide. All right, financial updates. That's how much we have unrestricted. The financial updates, of course, are at the end of January. I'm not talking about February. Not many expenses for the month, and here's the earnings report. So if anybody has any questions, I'll kind of go through this fast because I think most people aren't that interested. But just so you know, that's where we're at. Next slide. And it's time. Yes, sir. We do have new members here for tonight. They do get a free ticket. You want to do that now? We can give out new member free tickets right now. So if you have never been here before, raise your hand. Is John going to use this? Okay. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Is everybody good if I sit over here? Or do you want me standing up and running around? Not as loud as you.
Yeah, I like so closer.
Can everybody come on? Can everyone move? Cool. My name is John Easton, and I am the Director of Services and a professional guide down at English Covey in Colorado Springs. Colorado native. I was born in Leadville, Colorado, and lived here my whole life, and I've been outdoors in some form or fashion my entire life, and I'm deeply connected to the outdoor, deeply connected to TU's mission, so I appreciate all of you. I started professionally guiding in 2007, and kind of my big geek out spots are technical tailwaters and stillwater. I'm also an Umpqua signature fly designer, which is kind of an amazing thing I never thought would happen, but to see some of my creations that were born on the river make it into catalog and into your fly boxes is a pretty cool thing. And shame of self-promotion. If you don't have my flies in your box, you should. So, Stillwater. How many people in this room fish Stillwater serious? That's pretty common. Yeah, that's pretty common. And Stillwater represents a really cool opportunity for us anglers. Most of us here, I imagine, fish the South Platte River. I don't know if you guys know this. That river's not getting any bigger. And more anglers are coming into the sport, right? As a guide, I have kind of a tricky job. I want everybody to come fishing with me. But as the angler, I want to be selfish and I don't want anybody coming fishing with me. You guys can probably understand that. But Stillwater really presents a unique opportunity, especially where we live. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but here directly in our area, and especially in the drainage of the South Platte River, it's home to some of the best stillwater in the world. And with that, I'm sure you've been out to the river and it's been busy and that can be frustrating and stuff like that. The Stillwater for the fly fisher presents a whole new set of challenges. Reading the water is different. The bugs are different. The size of the bugs are different. The gear we use, our terminal tackle, our flies, everything is different. Locating fish, it's pretty easy to locate a fish in a river, right? There's dynamics in a river that give us all the cues and all the keys on where we need to fish. Lakes are a lot harder. And one of my favorite things is the solitude. One of the reasons I got into fishing just in general in the first place and being outside was the solitude. Being out there by myself. Sometimes I like to fish with 4,000 of my not so close friends, but a lot of time I want to be out there just for myself. I suffer from various forms of mental illness given on whatever. And the outdoors is my medicine. So solitude is very important to me, and that's something that I can get any day on a lake or on the still waters. And one of those other things too, I remember when I was a kid, is the exploring. Being able to just go out and explore and find new things. That's kind of what fly fishing is in Stillwater. It kind of reinvents itself. If you feel like you're stuck or you feel like you've mastered everything, dive into Stillwater and you'll get home real quick. A lot of people ask too, what makes a trophy trout lake? These are kind of the 5 ingredients that I look at in any Stillwater fishery. First, the size of the lake, the depth of the lake, and actually your best Stillwater beddings are going to be fairly shallow. I'll reference some lakes up in South Park several times through this presentation. But if you look at like Antero and Spinney, when those reservoirs are full, they're only about 20 feet deep, which isn't deep at all. And in fact, sun can still penetrate clear to the lake bottom at 20 feet. So that promotes a lot of substrate growth, a lot of bug life, which bugs are a lot of bug life is a direct result to good fish. The more bugs there are, the better the fish. Your food sources are insane in those lakes. The biomass is unbelievable in those Stillwater reservoirs. And not to leave the third one out, every angler I know that fly fishes and fishes a lot of Stillwater, they fish Antero and Spinney all the time. But actually, my personal favorite lake is 11 Mile. And 11 Mile is a little bit more mysterious. Almost the entire west end of 11 Mile is the same geography as Spinney and Antero. So from Goose Island to the inlet, it's only about 20 feet deep. So it supports a lot of that same type of habitat that those other lakes do. And I love 11. I mean, all the time I'm there and I only fly fish. So I just, I'm going to see all you there. So the other thing, a really important thing, is the exposure to elements. And that meaning wind. Wind is good, too much wind is not. But wind does a lot to the reservoirs. There's a term called stratification, and it's where the highly oxygenated water that sits on the top, it kind of churns that up. It's a zone where bugs are going to be and where trout are going to be. So if I'm on an area that has a little bit of wind on those lakes, generally it's going to be really productive fly fishing. Has anybody ever heard of Lago Strubel, Lake Strubel, and Patagonia? Anybody? We call it Jurassic Lake. They're the biggest rainbow trout in the world. That place gets real windy, and the result is the food sources that actually get churned up. Yeah, if you ever want to go catch like a 35-pound rainbow trout, you go there. The other big thing, where do you find fish? Just like much like a river, I look for structure. And sometimes we can't see that structure. So shorelines are a really good thing. Shorelines are a gradient, and fish love gradients. Different zones of water where they can quickly escape, they can quickly ambush meals. Those are going to be kind of the same thing. We're going to have a gradient. All different variable depths in those coasts. Dams are usually at the windward side of the lake, and that's a lot of food gets blown into those dams. So you'll get a lot of fish that cruise those areas. Inlets, you have fresh water. Every fish loves fresh water, right, guys? Trout Unlimited, clean water, right? It's going to be at the inlet. Islands present the same scenario. Structure, visible structure. If I see rocks or even down trees, stuff like that in lakes, those are going to be things that are going to really get my Scooby senses going. And another benefit of some of these really shallow lakes are the weeds. Those weeds, if you've noticed, if you go to Spinney right at ice off, there's hardly any weeds. If you go there right before ice on, the entire lake is choked out with weeds. So those weed beds, as they start to develop, I'll fish them almost in columns. I'll fish in between the weed beds. And there's all kinds of fish that's sitting there and waiting to ambush prey. So it kind of reminds me of bass fishing. Like I'm hitting these little tiny lanes in between the weed beds. But these are all the things that I really look at and focus on in terms of stillwater fly fishing. Real cool thing here is you can use different rods. My 9-foot 5-weight is going to do fine in stillwater, but it's definitely not going to be my recommendation. In these big lakes, I like 10-foot 6 and 7-weight rods. I like a lot of length on that rod and a lot of backbone to handle some of those fish. You can even use stay rods. Stay rods are great if you're fishing from shore. You can really bomb your rig out there. And the 2-foot rod, if I'm fishing in a float tube or a kayak, that 10-foot rod, since I'm so close to the water, is going to give me a little bit more leverage. And definitely you want large arbor reels. It's funny, so I work in a fly shop, and one of the common things that we get when you're lining up a trout reel is we don't put very much backing on it. In stillwater, we do. It's not uncommon to see your backing on stillwater fish, right, Tyler? So those are kind of my recommendations there for rods. And then I love hunting pike and muskie and taro, stuff like that. I'm gonna want something pretty beastie. Your saltwater 9-weight fly rod is kind of a really good tool for that. So something that's gonna throw a big fly, be able to throw a big line, and handle those bigger fish. Jump into fly lines. Your wick forward fly line is almost perfect for 90% of your applications. That's going to be good for obviously dry flies or even static nymphing up to about 15 feet. But where I like to spend a lot of my time are in the intermediate sink lines. The next slide explains those a little bit differently, so I won't go too much into that right now. And then obviously full sinking lines. If I'm fishing very deep water, sinking lines are a really good idea. For trout, absolutely. When I need to get my flies in the zone where those fish are. So this is a funny little diagram. I did not draw it, but it was the only one I could really find that best explains this. So your intermediate sink lines, like a type 1 line, it's going to drop down about 1 to 2 feet below the surface and kind of hang them. Type 2, 2 to 4 feet, so on and so forth. So if I'm getting into those 4 and 5 fly lines, those are going to give me a lot deeper applications for fishing. And this is going to really tie into a technique that I've really tried to pioneer, and I fish it all the time in stillwater. Again, we'll get to that. Again, my terminal tap of your 5X tippet does not belong on the lake. Leave it at home. Don't take it. You're going to be disappointed. I don't use anything under 3X. I'm going here. I'll go over that. I do have that up there, but um, for size, 3X is kind of going to be my main thing. If you're using tapered leaders, that's why I like the 12-foot leaders. I make my own leaders, so I'm kind of just going. If you buy tapered leaders, 12-footers are really good. That gives you a lot of room to for variable depths and stuff like that. When those weeds start to get thicker as we progress through the season too, I mean, I'm even going to jump down and go into 2 and even 1X. And I've snapped off a lot of fish at these lakes on 1X tippet. And they're masters at getting in those weeds. And if they get in those weeds, you want to have the proppers gear to be able to wrench out of it. Again, that's where kind of a taller rod can come into play too. And I'm a big fan of micro swivels. You can use micro swivels or tippet rings here. I love what micro swivels do. So for instance, you could have your 12-foot leader, put them on a micro swivel, and then run your tippet down from there. Micro swivels allow your flies to stay true. So if I'm in a lake or a river and I mend, if I mend too hard, I'm going to fold my whole line over. My flies are going to turn, everything's going to turn. With that micro swivel at the bottom of that connection, that's going to eliminate that. So I can mend away if there's wind, chop, or even in a river. I could do all that stuff and my flies are going to stay true. They're not going to fold or roll over, which is very important. And then, of course, my flies. If you tie your own flies, you want to tie all your still water flies on heavy gauge bloody hooks. Don't buy the 100-pack of hooks on Amazon for $4. You'll be disappointed. I've seen a lot of hooks break and hooks straighten in the still water. Even some heavy gauge hooks. So if you're buying still water flies, make sure they're tied on a stout hook. I kind of break down the seasons like this. Ice off spring, summer, and fall. Now, ice off is a very short season. I'm going to say it's 2 weeks long. And in fact, at Antero right now, you can consider we might be in ice off right now. Antero has been fishing great from the shore the last week and a half. Probably going to freeze up again. We'll have ice off all over. But that ice off time is one of my favorite times to fish still water. What happens is all the bugs work their way to the shore through the wintertime because that's where the warmest water is. That's where the bugs go. So the fish are there. And what happens right at ice out is all the trout are easily within casting distance from the shore. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to catch a fish over 30 feet away from you from the shore at ice out. Most of those fish are very in tight. So that's a really good opportunity to get out there, keep an eye on those lakes. You see 30 feet of water, that's what you want to get out there. Absolutely, it's my favorite time. And the fish are they're done. They're hungry. Usually that correlates with a lot of spawning time, so they're trying to pack on pounds. Spring comes right after that. Spring is pretty short too. I'm going to say spring is about a month long. And that's another time where they're still pretty close to shore. But we're going to start to see a little bit more dynamic bug activity. At ice off, it's kind of like scuds, maybe some smaller chironomids or midges. But in the spring, we're going to see even some damsels active, live scuds becoming more active, and the chironomids really start to kick in. And that spring, that late spring and early summer chironomid hatch is absolutely bonkers, bananas, crazy. So it's a big ish right here because I can't put dates to it because every year is different. But right after that, summer is going to be our longest season. And that's going to typically happen kind of that end of May clear through August. The end of the summer is notoriously harder to fish. The fish are sluggish. The water's warm, a lot like the rivers. But that first part of summer is a ton of fun because we have our lake mayfly called the Calvados that becomes active. And that hatch is even more bananas than that spring midge. So if you like to fish size 14 mayfly dry flies, have 25-inch trout crush them, you might want to try still. Yes. Actually, I'm going to go right into fall. Is October. I think of October as fall. October is my second favorite time to fish stillwater. It's funny, at ice off in fall, there's way less people out there too. But fall is a really cool time, and that's when I'm going to actually transition a little bit away from the entomology, like tournaments or even scud, stuff like that. And I'm going to go more into bait fish or streamers or really heavy on leeches, stuff like that. And a lot of times, what I like to do in the fall in a kayak or a float tube or even my boat is just dead drift with the wind, intermediate sink line, maybe a type 3 where I'm 10 feet down, and just dead drift and hang on to your flag. That can be super, super deadly. But I'll fish these lakes clear up until ice. So there's a lot of windows there to fish these lakes. And a year like this, I mean, there's been open water here and there all throughout the winter, and I've known people that have been fishing still water all winter, not through the ice. So take it year by year, but pay attention to these seasons. Fishing from shore obviously has some advantages. You don't need anything. You just show up with your gear and you fish from shore. And again, that ice off time period is perfect for that. So time of year is really kind of key here. If I was going to fish from the shore in a lot of these still waters in the middle of the summer, I would probably want a stay rod where I could really blunt that out there. But really, when I start getting into the summer, late spring and into the summer and even into the fall, I want some sort of watercraft, float tube, a kayak, a boat, whatever. You can just be way more mobile, cover a lot more water. So no cost fishing from the shore. That's always nice. And then your watercraft. If you haven't fished out of a kayak, fishing kayaks have come a long way. We're actually a Hobie dealer, so we have the luxury of taking out Hobie Pro Anglers. They are the Cadillac of fly fishing kayaks. You can stand up in them. You can walk all around the boat. You're super stable in that crazy South Park wind. I think for a personal watercraft, that is your absolute perfect choice. Float tubes are great. They're pretty inexpensive. But have you ever had to pee while you're in a float tube? Everyone that laughed has. And you'd go nowhere fast trying to get back to shore, right? Little funny story, I think we can tell it in this room. We actually have a guide who's an older gentleman, and he came up with a brilliant idea one day. He said, I'm just going to wear Depends. I mean, he thought he cracked the code. So he went out in spinny, and he sat in his Depends all day, and he was just happier than could be. Came in at the end of the day, and then he discovered what adult diaper rash is. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend that, right? Depends are like that accidental one-time thing, not hang out in a moment. Yeah, the hardest part, yeah, is trying to get your waders off to be, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. And then of course boats. This is obviously going to be your most expensive option. Who has a boat here? It breaks all the time, doesn't it? Mine does. Everyone I know with a boat, you're always scared. But boats are a great option. Again, you can just cover so much water. What you'll see in a lot of these lakes, if you go there or you have been there, is you'll see globs of people. You'll see, we call it Cheerio Coast. It's that north shoreline on Spinney, where there's just a million float tubes out there, and they're all in one spot. That is probably like my 15th or 16th favorite spot on Spinney to fish. So just because you see a lot of people fishing there doesn't necessarily mean that's the best place. I hardly ever fish Cheerio Coast. And this is the summer stratification that I was talking about. So has anybody ever heard of lake turnover? It's like when a lake turns over. So this is when that highly oxygenated water starts to lose oxygen. It becomes heavier and it pushes itself to the bottom of the lake. And those two layers actually switch positions. And that's why even in tailwaters, when a lake turns over, the tailwaters are all murky. But we'll see that a lot. We see it actually in the middle of winter, and we'll see it in the middle of summer. But what we're looking for here, there's a term up here called the thermocline, and that is the middle line there. In all of stillwater fly fishing, that is what I'm trying to find. The thermocline isn't dynamic. It can actually change. Right here, say this is a lake, right here it could be at 10 feet. Across the room, it could be at 15 feet. So it's not a lateral static line. It can change that thermocline. So what we do when we're stillwater fly fishing is we're trying to find the thermocline. And a really easy way to do this is you can take, I have an old fly line that's just rolled up in my boat, and I'll put a thermometer on it. And I'll drop it down at various depths. I think I have that fly line marked at 2-foot increments. And I can go down and I can record temperature measurements going down, and I can find that thermocline. If I get a sharp drop in that temperature, and then I just measure it up and I go, okay, I need to be fishing within this zone. And a lot of times, if I'm hanging those flies right above that thermocline, I'm right in the money. So using science again to maximize your time on the water, thermoclines are key here. Sorry, the top got cut off there. But that just says entomology and fly selection. We're just going to fly through a couple bugs here. Chronomids. So this is your midge. This is our lake midge. These guys are big. We fish these in Stillwater in that spring midge hatch, like 12s and 16s. Size 12 midge. That sounds like fun, right? Super easy to tie. You can tie a size 12 zebra midge and it's going to crush it for you. Throw a white bead on there for good measure and you have something different. But chronomids or midges are really fascinating. So they can live in an inch of water and they can live in 150 feet of water. How a midge pupates or emerges is really interesting too. They'll burrow in the ground, and when they pupate, they swim up a little bit and then they fall. They swim up and then they fall. They swim up and they fall. So it can take a very long time for that midge to actually make it to the surface. They're in the trout's feeding zone for a very long time. And if you think about it, if I was fishing an indicator rig with a strike indicator and a chronomid, and I have some wind on the lake, and my fly is doing this, it's actually perfectly imitating what the chronomid is. You've heard Pat Dorsey say, what they lack for in size, they make up in sheer numbers. It's the same in Stillwater. Scuds, one of my personal favorite bugs, and one that's really often overlooked. If you're not fishing scuds all over the South Platte River, you're making a mistake. You need to start. But even more so in lakes. This is probably the porterhouse steak in terms of their food sources that exist in a lake. This is a very easy food source. Scuds can swim. They're very sought after. In fact, I've seen fish. I saw a fish in a 11-mile reservoir, a very large trout, going through those weed columns, chewing on the weeds. And I couldn't figure out what it was doing at first, but actually that fish was eating all the scuds off the weeds. It didn't care about the flies that were out in the middle of the lake or leeches or screamers or anything else. It was after those scuds. Very easy meal, right? Trout are lazy and opportunistic. That does not change with Sweethead Lake. And scuds are really one of those things in Stillwater too that I'm going to fish year round. In fact, some of our ice fishing guides have been fishing scuds through the ice all winter. So it is, and if you're fishing Deckers or Cheeseman right now with that 150 CFS, the scud is a really good thing to throw on right now, guys. Leeches. Leeches have become very, very popular in probably the last 5 years, I'd say. And for good reason. This is another constant food source. The one really big tip that I have for Stillwater is I don't like to fish traditional leeches. I like to fish balanced leeches. So balanced leeches are actually tied on a jig hook. I'm going to step up here just real quick to point at this. You can see the eye of the hook right here. The end of the hook is right here. So you tie like a sewing pin with a bead on it. What that does when it's on your line is that fly sits perfectly horizontal. It's not cocked off like this. It's perfectly horizontal. And I love the balanced leech in Stillwater. And again, you can fish these year round. You can kind of go to town. There's not really a specific pattern I would even name. Um, any balanced leech in a lot of different colors is going to seal the deal for you. I harvested a leech in Antero. It was a number of years ago, and I put it in a little Tupperware thing. When that leech completely straightened out, I measured it. It was 9 inches long. 9 inches long. So my other suggestion here, if you do tie flies and you are tying these balanced leeches, leave them a little bit big. Take a pair of scissors or something, throw your old tying scissors in your boat or your vest, trim that tail, when you're there, because you might want that crazy big long leech on. Yeah, I was like, I'll be honest, it kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you should go. Yeah.
Always really.
I watched the fence. And then our calabatus. This is our lake mayfly. So all mayflies, you guys probably know this, but all mayflies in their adult stage have that upright sailboat wing. The calabatus on Stillwater have a very mottled look to them. And they're one of the few mayflies that actually have coloration or spots on their wings. But the calabatus are going, the fish get dumb. And you can have absolute, like 4-5 hour sessions under the surface on dry flies, fish just smashing these things. It's probably my favorite hatch to fish. You can do this in a static application, or even what I'm going to talk about called mid stripping. And it is just absolutely electric. In fact, during calabatus season, oftentimes I'll show up right before it happens. I'll fish all the emergers underwater. I'll have a dry rod rigged up because you'll just see a fish cruising around and you want to sight fish that guy. And you'll just have an electric few hours on the lake. And then when it's over, I go home. These fish will absolutely gorge themselves in these mayflies. So calabatus season, if you're fishing and you're seeing all those mayflies, and you can stay and hang out. We might wrench one or two more fish out through the day, but for the most part, it kind of comes to a screeching. Dry flies in size 12? Yeah. Damsel flies. I'm going to say this is the most misunderstood. A lot of people think this is a dragonfly. It's actually not. It's in the same family, but it's not a dragonfly. You can tell the difference between a dragonfly and a damselfly by the thorax. Damselfly has a very bulbous, big thorax. The damselfly is very, very dainty. In fact, the biggest part of a damselfly is its head. Its eyes are on the side of its body. And actually, how damselflies hunt when they're adults is crazy. They will fly around and they will actually take other flying insects out of the air and dismember them in the air while eating them. Like it's like that's pretty. But these are another insect that are very sought after by trout, and they have a very interesting emergence too. You're going to find the bulk of damselflies really close to the shore. So in those summer time periods when the bugs are maybe after the calabatus or whatever, or first thing in the morning, that's when I'm going to focus before the calabatus. I can focus on these damsels. And I like to fish these parallel to the shore on that intermediate type 1 line where I'm just below the surface and I'm just crawling these guys. So their emergence isn't straight up. It's at this very eventual rise throughout the lake. So they're swimming for a very long time too. They're in that strike zone for a very long time. The adult males are blue. The adult females are green, just like the dragonfly. But damsels, that left picture is a really cool picture of a damsel nymph. You can tell its head is just like, it looks like a hammerhead shark. Tyler, I believe, is spinning up some damsels tonight. And he has some really cool ones, a really cool variation of this damsel nymph. So you should definitely check that out. And you can fish these is dry flies too. You know when you're hopper fishing and you get that hopper right close to the bank, it's kind of like fishing damsel flies. You can bounce it off the bank and have it just right on that bank. A lot of these lakes do have undercuts at the banks right at the shore too. So some of those bigger predatory fish can come out there and and again, size 10 dry fly, sign me up. And then just some other things. We actually do have a lake caddis. It's called a Goddard's caddis. Has really big, long antenna. So when you see that fly in the fly shop and you go, what the heck is this for? That's definitely what it's for. I don't know where this crowd stands on fishing eggs and worms, but me personally, I think fly fishing is imitating what's in the water, so I do call them flies. If you disagree, then I guess you just disagree. But you know, in the spring and the fall when fish are spawning, everything knows what an egg is. They're lazy and they're opportunistic and they're looking for an easy meal. And a lot of times, just a San Juan worm is the code crab in a lot of these lakes when they're not eating anything. Crayfish, another one that people just do not pay attention to. Crayfish are probably my number one pattern to fish in 11-mile reservoir. All would say that. Crayfish are my top five patterns to fish on the Arkansas River tailwater. Hint. Another very valuable food source, a lot of food, that's a big meal for those fish, and they will seek that stuff out. And 11-mile has a billion crawdads in that. Streamers, obviously streamers work year round. The only thing I can say about streamers is you're going to really want to pay attention to your retrieves. If the water's really cold, you're going to want to slow those down. That's probably the biggest mistake I see people make is they're stripping everything way too fast. So pay attention to those water temperatures and adjust accordingly. In the middle of summer, when I'm fishing for pike in the summer, that's almost the kind of the key. It's almost like your saltwater fishing where you stick your rod under your arm and you just strip as fast as you can. So very, very dispersed. Yeah.
I don't see, and I've only fished them once with Richard Pulaski around Fort Carson. That's one of them.
Oh yeah. To be honest, guys, if I was to put every single Stillwater consideration up here, we would be here for quite a while.
You ever seen them in the South?
Oh yeah. Anything that the environment is food. I've caught fish spinning on mice, but I don't have mice up here. So, yeah, absolutely. Water boatmen, bees, bees. But then I'll jump up and obviously your hoppers on Stillwater can work good too. That can be a really good searching pattern. Or your hopper dropper technique, which I'll get into in a minute. And then another one, snails. People have fished a snail pattern. And that's always what I get. So that's a pattern that you're going to want to pay attention to. A guy that used to work for us a long time ago, his name was Zach. Zach and a guy named Justin and I were fishing and spinning, and it was tough. It was tough. We couldn't crack the code. Zach finally caught a fish, and when he grabbed the fish out of the net to pop the fly off, its belly was like really crunchy, to the point where he called us over to say, feel this fish's belly. And we felt the fish's belly, and it felt like there was a bunch of rocks in there. And I looked in the fish's mouth, and there were snails. So he went to the drawing board. That's actually his pattern there. He made this little mold and then hot glue and put a hook in it. It's actually a pattern umpqua carries now called the C-nail. And that's one of my gun crackers on Stillwater. So if you're having those tough days, there's a lot of snails in those lakes too. So again, to your point, if it's in there, it is definitely food. You can just hang them under an indicator, you can strip them, yeah, they just need to be there. Yep. And I'll go over some tactics here, and I apologize. I'm kind of trying to fly through this to keep my time. I don't know, guys. And I'll open it up at the end for some questions. So if you do have questions, definitely keep them in mind. But these are basically the 5 things that I kind of look at in terms of my tactics. You're going to be familiar with probably 4 of these, and you're going to go, what, to the second one. Now, static nymphing is very self-explanatory. I have a strike indicator, and then I have my leader and my flies. This is, again, where I'm going to go into a little bit longer leader, just so I have a lot of variation in my depth. Depth is key when I'm nymphing still waters, and I cannot state that enough. You could be fishing at 8 feet deep and nothing happens. You have all the right bugs on, and you move that indicator, you go down another foot or up a foot, and everything starts happening. So much like the rivers, how we're constantly adjusting our depths, you want to do that times 10 on a lake. Really, really pay attention to that. If you start hitting fish, pay attention to how deep you are and mimic that. Mimic that. And I'm going to guarantee you it's going to change on the next day. So you'll have to do that all along. And I think that has a lot to do with that variable thermocline, right? But I have seen, I've done a lot of stillwater fly fishing. I'm a nerd with it, and I've seen a direct correlation between the depth of my bugs and that thermocline. So I'm pretty personally convinced that that's the key. But again, you're very basic rig here. Why bobbers? I like to call them bobbers because it makes certain people in the room uncomfortable. You know what I mean now, right? But that suspension or static nymphing imitates a lot of these bugs' natural behavior, and even scuds. So fish are used to being in a certain part of the zone and feeding. And what trout will do in lakes is they feed very nomadically. So you'll almost see them in schools. It's not uncommon where you're with your buddies, your friends, and everyone hooks up on a fish, and then there's 20 minutes of nothing. Has anybody ever experienced that? And then a half an hour later, boom, boom, boom. So that's how fish feed. They kind of just work in very distances from the shoreline, and they feed in parallel manner at certain depths, right? So that strike indicator, the static system, can be very effective in quickly determining that. I can find those really golden zones in the water column. There's a bunch of different strike indicators too, and I was going to bring one, but there's an indicator called a slip indicator. And it's like kind of a little foam cylinder deal with a hollow plastic thing that goes right through the middle of it. Those are really, really good for still water because you can actually fish really deep. When you get tension on the line, when there's fish on the line, that little black thing pops out and that indicator slides clear down to your flies. So if you're fishing 18 feet deep, and you're trying to net that fish, that doesn't work. You better have a buddy there. So they're just called slip indicators. And I apologize I did not bring that one. Those are really cool. That's a tool that I have in my box on Stillwater homes. I like those bigger indicators. You see those bigger airlocks or those bigger oros, and you go, who would use those? You in Stillwater. You want those big bobbers. They're going to add in some of the weight in those roll casts, or if I have to cowboy cast it. But really, when you get that out there a little bit, and you've got some chop on the lake, it's really nice to see that thing. Really, really nice to see that big old giant indicator. And plus, your friends won't make fun of you if you're using that on the lake. If you take that to Cheeseman, they're going to make fun of you, right? And I can't stress this enough. Indicator awareness. When you start stillwater fly fishing, the number one rule is if you get bored, want to check your phone, your messages, and email, call your wife. That is exactly when a fish is going to eat when you're not looking. I have a really good friend that has 3 Winston rods at the bottom of Ventura. 3. It happened to him 3 times. Different years, all years. So if you're going to set that rod down, set it under your arm, make sure you got a handle on it. I don't know what it is. If they have a lookout and they're like, okay, he's not paying attention. But it seems to happen like a lot, like all the time. And one of the things, this is kind of something more homework for you, but I want you to look up a figure 8 dropper. a Euro guy by the name of Devin Olson kind of plays with this. This is how I have adopted into tying my droppers on my rig. I just put it there just for you to, you can research that on your own. Figure eight dropper is really kind of my favorite way to do a dropper. Now, this is something that I've come up with, and this is kind of a variation of several different techniques out there. We've got a lot of Eastern European going on here. We got zero nymphing, and then we have some stuff out of John's brain. But this is what I call the mid-stripping rig. This is absolutely my favorite way to fish still water. And this is going to utilize an intermediate sink line, a butt section of amnesia, chameleon, something like this, with rebound, the barrel swivel, and then a lot of tipping. So I like to use just a single diameter because it gets my flies down where they need to be. That leader that I'm going to use there, or that big piece of tippet, is roughly going to be right around 25% longer than the depth that I'm fishing. So if I determine I'm fishing a 10-foot zone, I'm going to make that about 11, 12 feet somewhere. And then I'm going to do my droppers off there. Now, this is really, really exciting. This is an exciting way to fish, and it's much more fun than staring at a bobber. But oh my, you can fish any stillwater bug like this. I love to fish leeches, scuds, damsels, and calabatus. I'll even fish chronoments like this every once in a while. But what happens with those intermediate lines is this allows me to target a specific pattern, and I'm going to hit it every time. I'm going to hit it all the time. The big thing here is we're going to be crawling my flies, not stripping it like a string. I want those flies to just be moving. And I'm going to add some pauses in there. And I'm going to say 98% of the time, you get an eat right when you pick that line back up, right after the pause. And again, you want to hold on to your rod. This is a good way to lose your fly rod. But the strikes are very violent, they're very dynamic, and just a really cool way to fish. And if you think about it, your flies, since you're just doing that crawling motion, your flies are in the water for a long time. So you're not spending time casting or trying to find a zone. You're spending more time in the zone, which is going to make stronger hooks. Big thing, can't overstate it. You've got to crawl the line. And I like to fish parallel to shorelines. And those shorelines could be coves or islands or anything like that. I'm going to work, let's pretend this table right here. This row of tables is the shoreline. I'm going to work in varied lengths and distances away from that shoreline until I find kind of those little zones where those fish are feeding. You can do it. That's a little harder to do on shore, obviously, but if you're in your float tube, your kayak, or your boat, that's a really easy way to determine that. I think one of the most frustrating things in lakes is trying to figure out where the fish are. Where are they feeding, what depth? So anytime I can shorten that and really speed that process up, I'm going to do it. That mid-stripping rig, fishing parallel to the shoreline, that's my go-to. I can usually figure it out pretty quick. And droppers are kind of cool because you can add droppers. You can do a sliding dropper. That's a very easy thing to do. You do a perfection loop on the end of a piece of tippet. You wrap it around your leader, you take the end of that perfection loop, take it through the loop, and you have a dropper that actually slides all around your leader. Does that make sense? So those sliding droppers are really good to use. You can fish different parts of the water column that way. If you tighten that knot up a little bit tight, it'll stay pretty taut. SA just came out with these markers. They're leader markers, and I love those things. Because I can mark those places on my leader where my droppers are if I'm using the slider dropper, so I can get back to that spot. Of course, your figure eight knot, or you can use the tag-ins off of blood or a triple surgeon's knot as well. But one thing I will say, and especially in still water, is when you're using a tag-in off of a knot like a triple surgeon's or a blood, it's very rigid with that knot. That's where the figure eight knot works really well. Again, look that up. Because the tension on my dropper actually goes to my terminal line. These are my just overall nymphing tips. Depth is key. Absolutely. That's your most important thing here, guys. Wind is good. Too much wind is not. So there's this thing, and I look at it every day, whether I'm going to be on the water or not. There's a free app called SailFlow, SailFlow, and it's a nautical wind forecast. And you can punch in any zip code, and it's going to grab all these forecasts. So it's like it cross references the National Weather Service and NOAA. But that is my Bible, especially when I'm going still water fishing. If I see that kind of 10 to 20 mile an hour wind, I'm pretty good with that. If it gets much more than that, I might be adjusting what I'm doing that day. So you can almost set your watch to it too in the season, and especially through the spring or summer. It's going to be nice and calm, pretty calm through the morning, and once you hit lunchtime, it's going to get pretty. Usually, it'll blow you off the water. Locate the weeds or locate any structure that I can see. That's going to be a key. And space out those flies. This isn't the time when you want to put your flies 8 inches apart. Put them 3 feet apart. You know what I mean? In those indicator rigs. If you do that and you start getting that top flies getting hit, that gives you a really good idea where that feeding zone is. Then you can shorten everything up. Maybe put more flies in that strike zone. I've hooked 2 fish on a nymph rig on 2 different flies once in a river. I've done it countless times in still water. So that kind of proves to me as well that they are really focused on those certain zones, certain depths. And really what I'm going for here in any of my fly fishing is size and silhouette of my flies. So it's not so much the pattern, but I really want to match that size. I really want to match that silhouette. Your dry fly and dry dropper. Isn't that a cool picture? It's a yellow Sally on a yellow Sally. I just think that's such a cool picture.
It's like Travis.
Yeah, yeah.
Damsels do the same.
Yeah, oh yeah, they'll be all over the place. Yeah. But this can be a very effective technique as well, too, especially when we have fish eating high emergers. One of my favorite techniques to fish during that Calvados hatch as well is this dry dropper scenario. Now I'm going to kind of blow your mind with the next slide. Most people do their dry dropper in the top graphic. I do my dry dropper like the bottom graphic. So I tie my dropper off of the tag of whatever knot I'm doing on my dry. Now what this does, and especially in still water, if you just think about the hopper fly, just picture any hopper in your head right now, commercially tied hopper. The bulk of the material that makes that fly float is where? Near the eye, right? Okay. So if I put a fly on the bend of the hook, I'm actually going to promote that fly and knock him down like this. If I have that dropper coming off the head of it, I'm going to keep that fly a little bit more perfectly balanced. This is why I fish hopper droppers in rivers too. But what it does is it keeps that dropper true. It doesn't get fouled by your coming off the back of the hook, especially in your cast. It seems like it would, but it doesn't. I've had very few foul casting a fly like this. I like the way it sits. I have to put less floating on it. And I can put a lot of weight on that dropper coming off of that tag. So again, I'm just putting whatever, I could have a 7-foot tag coming off of that knot and then have my dropper. So you don't have to do it, but I encourage you to try it. Someone showed that to me a little while ago, and I tried it, and I haven't looked back. So it's a really cool way to do that dry drop. And streamers, just a good rule, go beefy on your terminal tackle here. If I fish streamers anywhere where there's pike or anything toothy, I am using at least 20-pound fluorocarbon for a trout streamer, because you know what happens? Pike eat those too. And you'll shear off 40-pound or 20-pound fluorocarbon pike problem. For pike and muskie, I'm going 40 plus. A lot of times I'm using saltwater fluorocarbon. 2 years ago, I was with a client in 11 Mile, and he really wanted to get into some big pike. I had kind of an idea where we were getting into some decent sized pike, and I had him fishing 65-pound saltwater fluorocarbon He hooked a pike that we never saw. He fought it for about maybe a minute, and then broke the line. It's obviously its teeth, but I just can't see. And so always still bigger. And if you're thinking about these toothy critters, pike fishing and muskie fishing in Colorado is a whole different ballgame in the Midwest. It's easy in the Midwest, Canada, Alaska, stuff like that. Here, they are hard to target. They're total buttheads, in fact. You know, you can go out there and cast a 9-weight rod all day and never get a touch. So, but always prepare for it. Like, go beastier than you ever need to on anything that you're going to be stripping yourself. And my favorite knot to use for streamers is that non-slip mono knot. That gives my fly a lot of action. If you're using a binding knot like a clinch knot or any knot like that to a streamer, stop, because you're taking all the action of that streamer and what it's actually meant to do. Non-slip loop knot is the key. And then just quickly, some local spots here. I just kind of put this pertinent to everything we were just talking about. And again, I'm going to say all 4 of those reservoirs on the local spots have very, very similar dynamics. Terrial is a little bit deeper, and you see lower fish sizes in Terrial because of that. But those top 3, 11-mile skinny and Matero, they hold some of the biggest fish that you could ever tangle into. And then obviously some more regional locations. You've got the Delaney Buttes up this way. I love the Taylor Reservoir. That's a fun place to fish. It's a place to get into lake trout on the fly, which is something I suggest everybody do, and as well as Blue Mesa. And then that very last one, if you're unfamiliar with the Laramie Plains Lakes, that's a short drive from you right here. We check those lakes out. Wyoming people will hate you, but you're going to have a giant smile on your face. And again, this isn't just for trout. You know, a lot of our fisheries hold a lot of different species, smallmouth bass, obviously northern pike, stuff like that. So it presents a completely different opportunity than we normally get. And I love that, right? Like, I love that mystery of doing something different, stumbling, trying to figure it out. But it's just like that first time you picked your own fly, you tied it on with your own knot, you made your own cast, and you caught that first fish. Remember that feeling? That's what stillwater fishing is like, a lot, still for me today. So kind of the conclusion, yeah, break up the monotony. You have a huge opportunity and really good option to do this. It's a totally different pace. Stillwater fly fishing can be very boring. There can be a lot of gaps between the action. But if you're actually trying to figure out the puzzle, it's not that bad. If you're just sitting there staring at a bobber, it's going to get boring real quick. But this is going to make you grow as an angler. Really getting into stillwater fly fishing has completely changed the way I approach rivers, the way I approach everything. So it's made me a better angler. And again, we're maximizing those resources. You're talking about a lot of lakes that really don't see a lot of traffic. And that takes some of the pressure off our trout and our rivers. It gives you a new opportunity. And one thing I always like to tell people, my favorite person to take in stillwater is someone that's never done it. And the first thing I ask them is, have you ever seen your backing? They'd say no. And then hopefully just a short time later, they go, oh, so that's my favorite slide. That top picture was a picture. I was driving by Deckers one day and I snapped that. Yeah, that's what I thought. And at first I thought that was a guide trip, but it wasn't. It's just people fishing. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty short stretch. I don't know. Let's jam a bunch of people up. So I say, if you're sick of that, try this. Yeah. So thank you guys very much. Yes.
Given that we don't have much snow this year, and the rivers are going to probably be pretty low.
Actually, not totally. I'm going to ask you that. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm wondering, I feel really just like, just fishing in the morning, so you know, I mean, like Lake Dillon's 16 feet lower than it should be right now. So,
Right. Yeah. So you bring up an interesting point. We actually do see high water temps in some of these lakes, and especially every year. I mean, I'm just gonna guess here, but I'm gonna say the past 7 years I've seen insanely high water temps at spinning in a lake, 70 degrees.
Yes.
And that's without the lake being 38%. Spinning is 38%. It's never been that low. I remember fishing up there before spinning was there, and I've never seen spinning at 38%. So you bring up a really interesting point. The one thing, and I'll answer this two ways. So yeah, your thought in fishing in the morning is going to be safer in terms of water temperatures. The big thing with water temperatures is the oxygen, right? So higher water temperatures, less dissolved oxygen, right? It's a little bit different in lakes. Lakes hold the oxygen a little bit differently. I still stop when it's 68. I'm done. That's just my rule. I don't care if it's a lake or a river. I stop. So that is very good. If we're seeing low reservoir levels, those deeper lakes, we don't see those water temperatures get to that level in 11 mile because it is deep. I mean, there's places in 11 mile that are over 100 feet deep. So there's cooler water. There's more cooler water. That's why the South Platte is so cool all through the year, like Cheeseman and Deckers. They run water off the bottom of Cheeseman and it keeps it really cold. So, but a super shallow lake like Antero or Spinney, I'm definitely going to be paying attention. Now, to actually talk about the rivers, it's interesting, and those of you that have been around here for a long time, just think back on our lean snow years, or actually some of the years we have the best flows in the tailwaters. If you think about it, every drop of water in the South Platte River belongs to Denver. And they're water rights holders, right? Water rights supersede everything, even if we have water or not. So they're going to be making those calls for water. They're going to have to deliver that water. And that's where we'll see our storage facilities like Cheeseman, 11 Mile, and Terra all start to Trout, because they will have to deliver that water. So a little bit of a bright spot there, I guess, there is one, is that the rivers should be flowing great. Our tailwaters should be actually pretty good this year. I'm the eternal optimist, and I think we're going to get snow, and I don't think we're going to catch up, but I think we're going to get. But yeah, that was actually a great question.
and then would you suggest that, you know,
You can do that. Yeah, very good.
twin comes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so as the season progresses, that's what you'll notice. The food and the fish all move out further. So if you have some type of watercraft, that's why it's ideal because you can just cover more loss. Yeah.
For us flatlanders, what's the best way to get real-time information on ice?
Actually, I'm going to do some more Jamie self-promotion and turn you to our website, to English Gubby's website. We update our fishing reports every 2 to 3 days. Seriously, every 2 to 3 days. And it has like really good weather on there. But that's when we start talking about that. You know, and most of that's just because we're up there looking at it a lot. You know, we're going up there and doing that footwork. But utilize our fishing reports on our website. Yeah.
Yes, sir. One thing that I try to follow with the water is wind action and wind currents, wave actions, and the directions that flow goes. Is there a favorite or dynamic fish will follow with those wind currents? I mean, I have a tendency to want to go to the direction that has waves flowing towards the shores and flowing because bugs might migrate along that direction, oxygenation might move into.
Yes, and partly, yeah. Bugs are definitely going to be drifting in the direction of that wind, but just like a current in a river, the current 3 feet below the lake, I think, is completely different. So I actually think the opposite. So if the food's moving that way, I like to think the fish are moving against the grain, the feed. So I think it's true both ways. But yeah, anytime I'm getting wind blowing into something, whether that's a shoreline or a point, an island, something like that, if you get wind blowing straight into something, that's gonna alert my Scooby senses all in that area because it's gonna be churning all kinds of stuff up, and that's where fish can be a combination. Yeah. And structure just a shoreline or an island or a cove or an inlet or not an inlet, but or a point or something like that. Cool. Thank you. Yes. Any other questions? Yeah.
4 years ago, I read from CPW about health spitting mountain percentage of trout in the reservoir itself compared to the pike and the perch, all the other non.
Yeah.
What's it like?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm actually glad you brought that up because a number of years ago, pike were like the big bad word. They wanted you to harvest every single pike, and they've really come off. I think the introduction of perch into those lakes really curtailed pike predating on a lot of trout because the perch is way easier to catch. Pike are lazy, they don't want to work, just like a trout doesn't want to work. But the actual fish counts, Spinney, Antero, and 11 mile, the trout counts, they haven't really done anything about the pike. It's just gone like this. And so it's funny, an adult pike won't really ever pick on a trout. It's the hammer handles. It's about those 25-inch pike that do all the destruction on the smaller fish. So they're kind of like, they'll just kill them and kill them. Right? But that's gotten a lot better. The overall fish counts and the fish quality has really increased in all three of those reservoirs. And just so you know, CPW says it's kind of a 7-year cycle. So we'll see these cycles of really, really good fish, and then we're going to see that fish quality drop over 7 years and then come back up and drop again. That's what was explained to me. So like there'll still be nice fish, but do you guys did anybody fish Antero when they first opened it after they drained it? Jay, it was ludicrous. You would get a shot at 24 fish over 28 inches every day you fished. I'm not joking. Every fish you hooked was like the eighth. And then obviously people were taking fish, and that ended in the season. But so we'll get these cycles where you'll have really good fish classes. And last year they said was the middle of the fish class. So I think we still have, a good 3 years of really strong, healthy, good fish. The cookie cutter fish in the South Park Lakes is 24 inches. That's our cookie cutter, right? So yeah, great question. I love that because I never kind of subscribed to that. I don't really want to kill something unless I'm going to eat it. Obviously, if it's an ecological hazard, I'm going to pay attention to that. But I mean, there's a lot of data out there that shows that those adult pike don't really pick on trout, especially with those perch there. And the evolution of my pike flies has changed drastically in the last 10 years, where it used to be all trout colored patterns. Now I'd say 80% of them are red and white or perch colored patterns. Yeah. Yeah, catamounts, that's kind of what we refer to as the backyard. So they drained South Catamount. They did all the dam work there. They're filling it up this year. North Catamount should be open this year. So I think they opened the 1st of May or something like that. So you should be able to access the catamounts from driving up there. The fish class in Catamount is actually going to be really good. When you think about North Catamount was closed to vehicle traffic. The only way you could go in there for 2 years was hiking. You saw some pretty good fish come out of there this summer. So Catamount, if you want a really cool and pretty easy day, that would be a really good one. What's your website? Anglerscovey.com. ANGLERSCOVEY.com. Yes, sir.
We were talking about kayaks. Is that your watercraft of choice on those lakes, on those reservoirs?
Absolutely. I don't need to put gas in it. They're really easy to maintain. And they're surprisingly stable. We have a bunch of those Hobie Pro anglers, and buddy and I took them out, like stayed out a little too late one day. And we got caught on that far west edge of Spinney and huge whitecaps. We kind of just wanted to see how the boat behaved. And I was really surprised at the stability. After that, I feel really confident in them. But they're easy to transport. I don't need a trailer. I do have one on a trailer, but I mean, some of them you can put on the roof of your car, so you can deal with it yourself. But you can get around in those really quick, especially the Hobies. At a good clip, you can go 5 miles an hour. I mean, and you're in great risk. So you can move really good in those fishing kayaks. And there's a ton of good ones out there.
Are you using the pedal?
Yeah, the Hobie's the pedal. Every company has kind of a different iteration of that. Yeah, that pedal kayak's nice, especially if you're fly fishing, so you can keep your hands free. All right, well, thank you guys so much. If you do ever have any questions,